Good morning. Day 4, last day of the European Hydrogen Week, the week that is decisive to understand where is this sector, the hydrogen sector, to bring the sector together, but also to explore new elements that are important to make hydrogen a commodity and to create a marketplace for hydrogen. This morning we will discuss the digital product passports. That is something that exists already in the sphere of batteries, of textile. We have, as the European Union, new elements that come into force. Fit for 55 brought us the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, for instance. And we are very happy to listen in a while to the chief responsible on CBAM here in Europe. But can I show you why it's so important? If we can show the slide that we have prepared here. Next one, please. Oh, I have stuff. Here. What you see on this slide is that we have in a normal world of hydrogen markets a flow of physical hydrogen, be it hydrogen as such, you see the blue line, or derivatives. And this goes together with a lot of information. So there are data that needs to be put basically next to the physical flow. You will have data flows. And I mentioned already the EU borders, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which puts a new toll on something which is quite complicated. Somebody needs to certify the complexity of making a product CBAM ready. Then we have the certificate on refunobios, so the renewable fuels of non-biological origin. The definition, it's complex. We discussed it the last 3 days. We know it's in certain ways too complex. Doesn't matter. It's there at the moment, and we need somehow to bring it into an understanding. Did people who produce the hydrogen respect the hourly correlation? Yes or no? It might also depend then on the price of the hydrogen. And we have something which is called the Union database. The Union database brings massive information about gases within the European Union into a database in order to see, do they respect methane leakage, etc., etc. So this already is complicated, and that's why we need something to enhance business. Look at this passport there. That's a digital product passport, how it could look like. It's just an example. What is important is the barcode. You need to be able to take your device, to scan and to see, aha, it's from India. It's ammonia. It's produced in line with EU regulation, and so on and so forth. Next slide shows you a little bit the complexity. I'm not going through all of this, but what you can see here, and we took the example of our member Ineratech, from electricity generation to ESAF. ESAF, the air fuels, is very complicated. The blue line down there. You have several steps. You have the first step, it's the generation of electricity. Hourly matching, yes or no. Then you have the hydrogen production. Then you have, in ESAF, CO2 production. Is it biogenic or is it industrial CO2? Where does it come from? Then you have the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, in this case, upgrading, distillation, blending, and then you deliver ESAF. All these steps entail CO2 emissions. All these steps entail something which contributes to the overall CO2 footprint. And we are very, very happy. I see Ivana here because she will be on the panel in a minute. We are very happy that globally we have an ISO standard that gives you a measurement, how you can measure these CO2 emissions at every single step. It sounds complex. It is complex, but we want to make it simple. That is why we need all these information that you see here. Are we in line with less than 70% of CO2 reduction compared to fossil fuels in every single step? And this all then ends up in that digital passport. I'm not going through that example here right now, but the elements, audit elements, ESG, the history, where the products come from, tracing and also tracking. Who did it? All these claims will be depicted in the digital product passport, as it exists for battery, as it exists for textile. I admit, for hydrogen it will be a little bit complicated. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we see how the European Union would react. We have here the Director General of DG TAXUD. DG TAXUD is the authority that basically overlooks what happens at the border of the European Union. The European Union is the biggest internal market of the world, and trade is a competency on EU level. That means that you cannot discuss all these issues with member states, even if they are very, very big, France, Germany. You need to discuss trade issues with the European Union. That's why the European Parliament is very, very happy to have a strong competence in that field. So the strongest man in the European Commission is always the head of DG TAXUD, and he's here with us today. That's Gerassimos Thomas. He is somebody who looks into a big experience within the European Commission, and now, of course, he is responsible for exactly that mechanism. And the big challenge is how to put in practice the CBAM, which is extremely complex. But this is the political will, and this is also a very important step to be in line with the climate goals of the European Union. Gerasime, I have the honor to welcome you here on stage, Gerassimos Thomas.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, all of you, for coming here at 10 o'clock in the morning to listen to the taxman. You know, it's usually not. But as George said, I'm here not in this function, even if, you know, using taxation policy to green our economies is also part of the toolkit that we have. But nevertheless, I think it is important as we transform our economies very quickly, it is important to use all the tools that we have. I was planning, let's say, to explain a little bit to the audience the basics of the digital product passport, but I think Jorgos did a much better job. I just need to remind you that this notion of digital product passport was primarily established as a tool, as a conveyor of product information to consolidate all product information in one instrument. And it was originally born as a tool for environmental sustainability and recyclability. So the first digital passports were created for air conditioning, heating equipment, food preparing devices, industrial machines, real complex products. And this information that we have in the digital product passport is, of course, used when we import this stuff from outside the Union, but it is also used within the Union so that the consumers know how can recycle things. So the original, let's say, use of this tool, because it's just a tool, is not the policy objective to have a digital product passport, was focused on specific products that have to be recycled, that have consumers are buying on the shop. And we have the Commission has a concrete work plan that it will be published in the beginning of next year, and say which products will have the digital product passport first and who will take a bit more time to develop. There is a huge exercise, obviously, to put everything to the QR code that we were just shown to the screen. And this is done primarily by our colleagues in DG GROW, the, let's say, Industrial Policy Directorate, and they cooperate according to each product with other DGs. You will have in the panel a number of people to go through this. For us, it is very important, of course, as responsible for the border coordinating, you know, the control of the European border. We use the digital product passport and other instruments that we do have in other areas in order to make sure that the products that come from third countries into the EU, they comply with certain criteria. So in technical terms, we are linking the digital product passport, you know, to our customs procedures so that the customs can check in an easy way all the technical specifications of products. we create our own, let's say, methodologies, as is in the case of the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, who covers hydrogen. We have to issue in the next 6 months specific implementing acts and delegated acts. This is the EU jargon. I hope not all of you here are familiar with the Brussels jargon. I hope, because if you are, you know, it's something is wrong. So we will have specific rules on, you know, how we will calculate the carbon intensity of all the products that are covered by the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and hydrogen is one, but so are catalyzers, etc. So we have to have regulations, first of all, to define the characteristics and then put them in a way that it is easily usable by customs, by consumers, by regulatory authorities, by market surveillance authorities. I think we need there are two drivers, you know, in this process, that everybody is trying to make sure that products, raw materials, products are cleaner, and also everybody around the world is trying to make sure that technology moves quickly, because we will need much more technological innovation as we move forward. There are different drivers, different technologies that can be used, and I think our stress from the point of view of the government is to be able to incorporate new technologies quickly into the process. We cannot hinder process because of the regulatory process. We have to facilitate progress. So that is very important, and I think the digital product passport is, as a tool, very important for the overall clean transition and recyclable policy. And we have to see then how it will apply to hydrogen, and what is useful, you know, to be done through this tool, and what is less useful, or certain things can be done faster. For example, in the case of the CBAM goods, we will have methodologies and adoption of certain standards that we, in the first place at least, we will not use digital product passport, because we need to have the CBAM operational as of the 1st of January 2026. So we will use parallel processes, but I think if we take a broader view on what is required in this transformation period, I think we will come to the similar, let's say, objectives. Now, the process of putting, let's say, all product information in a single instrument is enabled by technology. A lot of it has to do with blockchain technology and artificial technology. That's how you put the information into a single, you know, instrument. But it has behind it a quite complex, at some cases, regulatory process. And we need to make sure that all the regulatory processes are well aligned, because they serve different policies, and we need to make sure that there is a good verification of the different elements that are behind. So what we try to do in the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, for example, whether it is for steel or for aluminium or for hydrogen, is to make sure that the government process of verification uses as much as possible, you know, the private sector or the industry sector specifications. If we look at, I on purpose use non-hydrogen examples, you know, to zoom you out, because hydrogen is a very important sector, but it is part of a complicated supply chain. So we will go out and see what are the standards that the industry has for green steel or for green aluminum, and then we go in and make for CBAM standards that are as close as possible to the standards that the industry has. This is the key to success, because the industry will use their standard to comply with CBAM, but the industry will use their standard to get financing from IFIs or multilateral development banks. They will use their standards to comply with regulation in other countries. So in effect, the way that the industry standards should lie at the core of the different government regulations. And that's what we are trying to achieve. And I think it is very helpful and very good to have here a sector and an industry that it is so keen to work together with the regulators to achieve this proximity. There are some sectors that are sort of have a long tradition and a different transitions, and within the sector, people are very wary about new technologies and new products. So it is a pleasure here to work with the hydrogen sector, because the sector itself, the companies itself, the actors themselves, you yourselves, are very much prone to technological progress and making sure that you have your own standards, that they are very close to our standards, and we work together to achieve the result quickly. So I think that is the key to success. I think it is important to build on the regulatory framework and the standards that the industry does, and then we will use them for the government control aspect, whether it is to make sure that the customs can do the work very efficiently, whether it is to make sure that if there are CBAM certificates to be bought or to be avoided to be bought because the product is compliant, that we use a smooth process, and I think that is very important for us. Hydrogen is essential for the transition. I just come back from Baku as Jorgo Chatzimarkakis. He was here last week. Their declarations, the industry pledges are extremely important to move forward. We know that the government cannot do it alone, and therefore is extremely important to have a good cooperation with the industry all the way down to the creating the standards that the industry owns and can, let's say, develop well, and therefore we can take over and incorporate in our standards. So I'm looking forward to your discussion. I think it's a very important initiative to bring from the engine room all the way up to the regulation, the role of the private sectors. In CBAM, we will also use private sector verifiers, that it's the only way to work this. We have global trade on all the CBAM goods like you have in hydrogen, but it's the same for all products. The products are incorporated, and hydrogen is incorporated in the supply chain of complicated supply chains. So we need to make sure that the private industry has ownership of the standards, and they use them yourselves in your own trade, and we as regulators use them in the appropriate format going forward. So thank you very much. Congratulations for the, let's say, the show of strength of innovation in this venue, and looking forward to listen to your progress you are making in making the QR codes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Many thanks. And basically, you said you are a tax man. Our first guest on this panel here, where we will discuss, and we are happy to have you here with us some minutes, because you said you need to leave a little bit earlier, is also a tax man. And of course, guests we will from outside Europe we will welcome first. So I'm very happy to welcome here Prasad Chaphekar, who is the Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of Renewables and New Energy. Yep, here. I'm happy also to welcome another representative of the European Commission working on that field from DG GROW, Silke Obst, Deputy Head of Unit at DG GROW and responsible. Hello, Silke. Let me welcome Susana Moreira. She's the Executive Director of H2 Global Foundation, a very important factor in bringing up the trade in the world. And you talked about the private certifiers. One of the biggest worldwide is here with us, and we got the boss. We got Stan Zurkiewicz, who is the CEO of DEKRA.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Stan.
We didn't have the opportunity in the speaker.
Last but not least, my colleague Ivana Jemelkova. She's the CEO of the Hydrogen Council, and she's here. And dear Ivana, we were in Baku together.
That's right.
I know that you have been traveling a lot. I'm still wearing this nice logo here from Baku.
That's right. We'll talk about it in just a moment, but you see, we left it all on the table in Baku, right? I have no more voice.
Indeed, and that's why I would like to give you the floor first, Ivana, when discussing the global scene. Let's set the global scene. We have worked now many years on getting something like an ISO standard on a global scene done. That was already done in Dubai last year. So in Dubai, COP28, the International Hydrogen Trade Forum, so a gathering of around 40 states, signed a declaration, not a declaration yet. It was basically signing that we like the standard that has been built up. The Hydrogen Council was holding the pen together with UNIDO just to explain how these things evolve. So Hydrogen Council was very much involved, and I think let's brag a little bit. We were very proud when this year at COP in Baku, these states came back together and said, we sign after the pledges on renewables and on efficiency this year, a declaration on hydrogen altogether, together with a pledge on storage, on grids, and so on and so forth. It's a logical consequence.
Absolutely.
So for me, and I know that your voice is leaving, that's why I would like
My
to
last
give you
panel, I'll give it all.
Last panel, give it all. To discuss the importance of that standard for the idea of a digital product passport. So why is it so important to combine both in order to enhance global business?
Perfect. So 2 steps back first, really a huge thanks to Hydrogen Europe for being such a great partner. And you're right, Jorgo, we were very proud of the work done in Baku. More than 20 different industry groups from around the world came together to issue a joint call to action to governments. And governments answered. They gave us an incredible level of attention. And I think that's critically important. Things are getting tough in the energy transition, but hydrogen is still seen as a vital component to this conversation. So congratulations to you all. There's lots to celebrate. I know we forget it easily, but really a huge kudos and a hydrogen high five to our friends in Hydrogen Europe and elsewhere. Right. I will say the exact same thing I said at COP. There's no clean energy future without hydrogen. And there is no hydrogen without standardization. It's plain and simple. And while you may say, oh, that's a boring topic, I don't want to hear anything about it, way too complicated, I will challenge that, because I will tell you that, in my view, standardization is the single most important game changer for the hydrogen conversation for 2 reasons. Commerciality. If we could define, measure, verify, certify the climate attributes of hydrogen in a simple, robust manner, we can price, we can trade, we all know the language that we're speaking. Suddenly, we can cut through so many of these uncertainties and confusions, which brings me to the second point, and that is trust. You very smartly included that in the title of this session, Jorgo. There's so much misunderstanding about hydrogen, whether it's truly clean, right? With standardization, with that simplicity, clarity, measurement, facts, we could just cut through all of this. And we could actually focus. We could actually focus on getting down to business. And that, for the organization I represent, is the ultimate value proposition of standardization. Last point I make, you talked about, let me simplify it this way, the content and the container. The content and the container. The container, a wonderful virtual, digital QR code app, your phone, right? An easy way to carry information. Content, critically important. Someone mentioned during our prep call, it's a little bit like your credit card and your Apple Wallet, right? You would just want to put it in there. We all know that if it's easy to pay, we shop more, right? Which is what we want in the hydrogen space, but it cannot be clunky. It needs to be incredibly reliable and robust from the get-go. And this is where the Council has been working for the last 2 years with the ISO, with IATCP, with UNESC, if those acronyms tell anyone anything. Key players in hydrogen. And we're very proud that we are really progressing this. And as soon as these standards come online, the next step we need is for all governments to embrace them. So we finally have this common baseline that will change everything on the hydrogen trajectory.
Maybe just to make sure, the Hydrogen Council is a club of CEOs on global level, including China, including all geographies. So you have them all.
20 different countries.
20
exactly.
different countries, that's good. Maybe because on the standard, maybe I'll stay with you for a while on the transparency issue.
Yeah.
Because we were criticized after Dubai by some sectors to be too transparent, too open. How can you criticize that? So, I don't understand, but obviously other sectors have something to hide. And we don't want to hide
Quite
that.
the opposite. I think the message is extremely clear. The hydrogen sector wants standards. We want standards. We welcome them with open arms. In fact, we absolutely need them. Without standards, there will be no hydrogen business. It's extremely clear.
Let's stay on the global level. We will come to the certification scheme and how to certify and who does it and what exactly in a second. Let's come to Prasad, who represents a country that is basically a new kid on the block in hydrogen, but very fast growing. What do you need? What do you do in hydrogen in a nutshell? And why do you need something like a digital product passport in order to get it done?
So I'll just be brief and focus. So we see that since we have building up such a huge capacity for export, it needs to be acceptable to other countries. I mean, you need to follow the market, and if the market needs that you be trustworthy, and more trustworthy than we are today, you need to build up systems which don't exist today. And there are current gaps in the certification schemes, not in the way they certify, but for example, there are still possibilities of greenwashing. A guy may sell the same product to different people, the same certificate. There are not enough safeguards to prevent that kind of greenwashing today, and there are a few others which we'll discuss on the line. So even we have been developing our own scheme for certification, which is very closely aligned to the COP standard. So what we are going to do with the passports, it's something we want to have more modules. The more modular you make it, the more you can add later on as you grow. So there are 3 modules which we are currently thinking of. One is the module for the emission part, the upstream, the production, the transportation, and the use. Then you have the regulatory conditions, like you have additionality and other. That's the second part of it. And the third part of it is the product itself. Like you have hydrogen, you have ammonia, you have methanol, but hydrogen is the base of all of this. It makes sense to us to have hydrogen first, and then if you are making ammonia from it, you have to make, add on to that block as ammonia or methanol or whatever you have. And we don't see this passport as just a proof of that it is compliant. It needs to be an integral part of the transaction. That certificate needs to move with the product. If it doesn't move with the product is not green anymore. So you need to have not just one certificate, it needs to be per kilogram or per ton or whatever unit you want to split down in. Unless you have these characteristics, it will be difficult to keep the trace. It's not just guarantee of origin, it's the origin and transport after that. And the way to achieve it in India, we feel that we have to use what we call is the digital public infrastructure, which means it's a thin layer of code by the government. It is owned by the government and operated by the government, so that to prevent tampering in that. But with open APIs, so anyone can join onto it and exchange data. We're already doing it big time with the payment part. I mean, you mentioned payments. India, in a single day today, processes more digital payment than the USA does in the entire month. That's because of digital public infrastructure. So we plan to do something similar for hydrogen, a standard which is acceptable globally, and now even UPI is going global. So something similar which can easy to use for every country, not just us. So that's our current thought, which we're going in that direction right now.
Excellent. Let us now hear from H2 Global, which is, and Susana is the executive director and co-chair of the board of the H2 Global Foundation, which is basically the guys that are doing H2 Global, that are implementing the things. And in your policy brief, you say standardization, hydrogen, certification, enhanced traceability, transparency, market access. All this is what you are thriving for. How does that relate to the digital product passport? Because H2 Global, for all of us, is a German instrument, and it becomes more and more a German-Australian, German-Canadian, German-Indian instrument to enhance basically the production of hydrogen in the global trade. Why is that so important for you, Susana?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and good morning, everyone. There's a couple of points. One is that report you're mentioning, we did it together, actually. It was with the European Hydrogen Council, and we were really happy that we would have that opportunity to work together. For us, just in a nutshell, I'm representing the foundation. The foundation owns HINCO. HINCO is a subsidiary that conducts the auctions on behalf of various governments. We were indeed born in Germany, but increasingly we are becoming global, as our name indicates, and we are working with various governments that are interested in this approach. For us, in particularly for HINCO, as it conducts its auctions, it needs to be able to be sure that the products that are auctioned, that it eventually is purchasing, are going to meet the criteria that are needed for the countries for which they are being imported into. So in this case, as Jorgo indicated, we started with Germany being our primary supporter, so the imports of the products are being imported into Europe, which means they have to meet all the criteria. So for us, the fact that the first auction in particular, we didn't have yet fully the regulations and the standards weren't there, it creates an added layer of complexity, trying to figure out how are these products indeed compliant, what is the right interpretation of the regulation. So it creates a layer of complexity that really makes it much more difficult to purchase the product. And then we also want to make sure, as the various standards are developed, that we can then audit it. And the digital passport provides a wonderful tool to do that, because it diminishes the need for all these different audits. So that, I think, will help a lot as we progress, because as Dr. Chaphekar indicated, it's not just when the products are produced, but it's the whole value chain until they are delivered to the off-takers. So we need to be able to have a system that allows us to track these products, that we are confident and when our off-takers, the buyers of the products, purchase the product, that they are confident that it meets all the criteria that are needed in a very transparent manner and contributes to the trust that you were indicating. So,
trust, huh? Trust and bring more trust, but also speed.
Yes.
By digitalization into the process. That is something that DEKRA normally does, Stan. What is your approach? What parts of this whole chain would you certify, and how do you do this? Is it a new business for you?
So let me just say that without trust, there is very little value in the digital product passport. So by verifying the essential data points, we create the essential trust between the consumers, between the industry stakeholders, between the regulators, that will be indispensable towards the accelerated adoption of the digital product passport. So what we do, we provide basically the independent verification of the information that is being provided by the producers, by the various stakeholders within this value chain. And that happens across, and you no longer have the slide on the over there, but it happens across all these different stages of production, transportation, different processes that happen until you have the end product that is being delivered to the off-takers.
So basically, it's all the single steps that will be certified, also the governance of all of it. Is it also something that you would certify?
That's correct. I mean, the ultimate objective is that when we have the digital product passport, the users of the passport, they know which data points have been independently verified. And that will require a governance system, and that will require verification across those different process steps.
Stan is fluent in Chinese, so because he lived many years there and he understands language and culture. I'm asking you whether we, by that, could also rely or could trust also other geographies that might want to accelerate things. So we want to have good relations to China. Does that help to have reliable relations?
I would say that this would be the objective. Part of the challenge that we currently have with the adoption of green hydrogen or green hydrogen economy is this fragmentation of the regulatory landscape. And this digital product passport, it does not achieve harmonization per se, but it can be a bridge towards having a single source of data that could open the doors and ensure accelerated verification and compliance with different regulatory frameworks that we may see in China, we may see in India, we may see elsewhere in the world. So indeed, that would be the objective. Enabling the global trade would be one of the targets that we would like to achieve with the digital product passport.
Yeah, we have put the slide again there, so you see the single steps. Let's come to the workroom of the European Commission, because Gerassimos was here outlining the big picture, and rightly so. We need to understand where are we as European Union globally, how to implement that, Silke, and that's the big issue here. You are working basically in DG GROW on that issue. Where are we at the moment?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your interest in the digital product passport as a tool. We're really proud that you share our vision of the DPP becoming really a platform, a container beyond sustainability, and also to facilitate trade and many, many other things and automation. So we share a common vision here. So what do we do concretely? We do two things. My team is in charge of actually setting up the system as such. You might know that the legal basis for the DPP is the eco-design regulation, which just entered into force, and which also sets out the basic elements. We have to build a central registry. The data as such will be stored decentrally by the manufacturers. And there's also a web portal. Well, I will not bore you with the details. That is what we are doing. In parallel, and you've spoken about this, the DPP is being rolled out to a variety of sectors. The first one will be batteries. They will come on board in February 2027. And then we have detergents, we will have textiles, and so on and so forth. And for each of these sectors, and this is what DG GROW is doing as well, we will adopt sectoral legislation because we have to, of course, flesh out the details of how the DPP will work for these different sectors. And in particular, what will be the information that needs to be stored in the product passport. So what does that mean for hydrogen?
I can tell you immediately for hydrogen, it means that elements like defining the different methodologies of hydrogen, so the REFUNOBIO, the renewable fuel of non-biological origin, easily said green hydrogen, is already there, is in place. I know that the Commission thinks I'm an enemy of that. It's not me. It's many, many people who want to make hydrogen a reality think that there need to be some adaptation earlier than 28. But this is one part. The other part is the low carbon hydrogen definition, which is on the way. Commission already launched basically the public consultation. We need to have a little bit more speed here. But in the end, we have two definitions of hydrogen. The renewably produced, the low carbon hydrogen. These are the fundamental information that you would need that then would be certified, hopefully, by STAN. And that's what we want to accelerate.
Exactly, but let me say a few words about hydrogen and the DPP, just to speak also about timing and manage expectations. So hydrogen as a product for the time being is not on the priority list of products to be regulated first and to be brought within the scope of the DPP. For good or for bad, speak to the Commission, have the priority list change. There is a priority list in the regulation. Maybe you can still change this. But that's for hydrogen as such. But hydrogen is also a very important ingredient for chemicals, and it is an energy carrier. You've spoken about this, all of you. For instance, for steel production, green steel wouldn't be thinkable without hydrogen. And chemicals and steel are on the priority list. And here is your first chance, I would say, because we will have sectoral legislation on chemicals, on how the DPP will be rolled out for chemicals and how the DPP will be rolled out for steel. And so I imagine that these sectoral rules should also speak about the possible ingredients. What are the information requirements? What are the performance requirements? And possibly as well, must this be certified? With elements must be certified, because it will be the manufacturer's or the importer's responsibility to populate the DPP, to put the data in. So which level of trust do we require for which data point? I mean, this will be regulated by the sectoral legislation.
If I understand you correctly, hydrogen is then on the priority list because chemicals, ammonia, ammonia will be one of the most traded commodity worldwide. That's in the interest of H2 Global. First tender led to ammonia from Egypt as basically the winning project. India being strong in ammonia. So basically you told us we are on the priority list, and that's good news. But we need to make sure that people understand that. It's not about hydrogen. It's about all the derivatives. It's about CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, is about reducing carbon. And that's why it's good to talk, because we might overcome this misunderstanding that it's not a priority. Basically, hiddenly it is, and by that it is.
It's about the impact that hydrogen is driving, right? It's about what hydrogen does for the rest of the energy transition.
That's the thing. Sometimes there are misunderstandings or different priorities. For India, it has become a major priority, as we see here. India, partner country, India, major views on hydrogen from top level, Prime Minister Modi, to the workroom, basically, of the ministries. Is that true? So ammonia being one of the top priority?
So currently, we have the largest tender for domestic consumption of green ammonia ongoing. It's 740,000 tons per annum for 10 years for domestic. We do import ammonia. We make ammonia, grey ammonia, but we also import a lot, around 3 million tons. So we're starting off with replacing around 25% of that. So that is to replace the grey ammonia with green, which is produced in India. So that is the one priority. And in India, we have most of the oil refineries are public sector units. They're owned by the government. So we don't need a mandate directly to make them use green hydrogen. It's the direction from the top is sufficient for them to comply, and they are on their way. Their targets are around 900,000 tons extra apart from the ammonia which I mentioned by the end of this decade, and probably more if the price drops. So things are relatively simpler to enforce in India in terms of the refineries and the ammonia, because the government also gives a lot of subsidy for ammonia, because the farmers are an important group, a pressure group in our country, so the prices are a bit regulated there. So government has to pump in whatever is excess of what they can't afford to pay. So ammonia and refineries are both controlled, which makes it easy for us to use our levers to make them go green. And everyone ultimately, we also have the carbon market coming up, which they would need the credits for using the green ammonia, which would need a certification again. So we would again need certification even in our home to transfer the product and the certificate among different players.
Let's talk about the timeline. I'll come to India in a second to understand when you will be ready, but maybe it's time to understand how fast could you build up the single certification schemes, but also the governance certification. What's your experience with timelines in this? And I want to know also how fast you would need it.
So of course the digital product passport is being implemented for different priority project categories, and ourselves and different independent third-party certification bodies are prepared to conduct the verification work that we would be required to conduct. I mean, could we apply similar or the same capabilities to validation of data included in the hydrogen product passport? Absolutely. So it is something that would require years to put in place and to implement. I don't think so. I think that we as independent third-party industry, as certification bodies, we would be in position to, within a frame of, let's say, 6 months to 1 year, put the necessary element in place to perform that verification.
6 months to 1 year, Silke, I'll come back to you in a second. Would that match, Susana, with your first tender, which is also ammonia-based?
Well, actually, I think we are not super aligned because in addition to the first tender that that you mentioned, the pilot one, and we have the sales side of it coming in 2026. But we have the next large upcoming tender with 3.53 billion plus 300 million from the Dutch government, which is currently under review by the Commission and hopefully will launch in the first quarter of next year. It might be a little, not yet at the same time, because we are running, as we are trying to make this work and have projects actually produced, we have to sort of adapt as we go along. But it doesn't really matter. I think Ivana was very clear. We need hydrogen. We need to get these projects going. So we have to, as we go, maybe we will adapt and adopt these new approaches because we cannot wait for them to be developed, for us to do the tenders to get these projects off the ground. But I'm very encouraged, as I said, by the development of this, because it will be extremely helpful to us for speed, because we need to get these projects funded and then product into the market.
I see Stan take some notes already, so he will make it happen.
I know, I saw that. I'm like encouraged by this.
He will make it happen. Let's turn again to the global level and the ISO standard and the next steps, because this is also a fundamental part to ensure the transparency, as we said. And again, this is to make clear, the hydrogen sector is extremely interested in showing all elements. Hydrogen leakage, part of the standard. Methane leakage, part of the standard. So just to set things right, it's not to hide things and to put them under the carpet, it's the opposite. Possibly other sectors might have an issue with that, and that's why they're criticizing it. What are the next steps? So we have this International Hydrogen Trade Forum. We have some actors on the global scene, like the UNECE in Geneva, that take care of standards. What's your gut feeling? When will we have basically standard? Always depends on acceptance by states, clear, but these standards as the standard commodity to make sure our ideas here fly.
One step back. Progress, more important than perfection. We don't have all the answers right now, so we need to keep that agile mindset and keep evolving. There will be no magical moment when some magical ISO standard descends on us and all of our problems are solved. That's not going to happen. But we need to bring together the ingredients so that the container contains the right content, to put it in a silly way. But it's really about that, right? So to your question, the short answer is the ISO standard for the technical specifications that allow us to calculate the greenhouse gas footprint of hydrogen production. A clunky name, but a very important one. Basically, it allows us to say, my hydrogen is carbon intensity X, carbon intensity 2, carbon intensity 17. That is a game changer in the conversation, because right now we're all in our little rabbit holes. If I can put it very simply, all countries around the world are doing their thing. They're using different language. Some are still very stuck in colors. Some are saying things like renewable, low carbon, low emissions, clean. I mean, how is business supposed to make sense of all of this? So I don't think there will be a moment where we convene the new United Nations of hydrogen and all governments will say, from tomorrow, we will all align on this one common language. That's never going to happen. So again, progress rather than perfection. Everybody can keep doing their thing, but we need to understand each other. And the way to understand each other and the way to cut through some of this noise is to create that baseline. And that's what we will start seeing with the ISO standard. So it will be ready as soon as early 2025. And as soon as it hits, I will be literally in all of your inboxes, sharing copies, mailing you copies, and asking you to please talk to your governments to please make a reference to this fundamental piece of the infrastructure in national law. That's where we really need to hit the ground running and do the work.
If I could add to this, so harmonization, I agree with you. Harmonization will be difficult to achieve. But what we can achieve with digital product passport is interoperability.
There you go.
Because we can have certain data in the digital product passport that can be used to validate compliance with the schemes used in different parts of the world and in different sectors. Interoperability is much easier to achieve than harmonization.
There we go.
It's very interesting, and I would like now to get EU and India to get involved into that discussion, because if we do the interoperability without waiting for, the blessing of UN, we will not get it, but without waiting for too many member states. Let's say between H2 Global, between India and Germany, would we need to wait for the European Commission? So I'm asking because some things can be put forward immediately without waiting for lengthy processes on global levels. Would that be something that you could do? And I would like to have your comment, Silke, but maybe Prasad and Susana, can you comment on that? Could you run forward?
We certainly could, but for that we need to have our certification scheme in place first, which we'll do by end of next month. And parallelly, because we would want it to be as close as possible to the COP standard, the ISO standard. So there's no doubt in that. There's no reason to deviate from it unless there's very specific reason for deviation. But other than that, as I said, we would rely more on open standards and open source to actually make it more acceptable to everybody, rather than, as you said, wait for a global system to develop. We can always start it that RFNBO compliant ammonia made in India could be verified by anyone in EU using our what we will develop as our a digital tool, you may say.
Yes.
For the developers to register, we also have what we call as the accredited carbon verifiers who will verify the carbon content. So they can register, and then we'll have to verify whether they have done the reporting properly. And once that is in place, that is the base which you require. Once that is in place, you can play with it as much as you like. So
excellent.
Sky's the limit.
So you have verifiers in India, so the Stan's colleagues in India, so something like that. Susana, H2 Global, Indian chapter, basically.
Yes, we are very excited where we started our engagement with India. So I think for us, just to answer your question, I think were the partners in our tender to be any of the member states, we will always have to comply with EU regulation. So, which means that it will be the standards. And of course, we will work together as we develop our partnership to identify potential issues that may emerge between the way you certify and what is acceptable into the EU. So that is part of the partnership. But, were we to do a tender between India and another country like, Singapore, or Japan, and South Korea, then those other standards are the ones that we also need to work with. Because H2 Global, we provide this support or this service, but we always need to comply with, of course, the legislation that is valid in the countries that import. And for us, the interoperability is really critical, because I agree with also what Ivana said. Waiting for the perfect will never get us to where we need to go. We need to be accepting that we need to learn as we go and with good faith. I think that's the thing that you're saying. The sector has very good faith and try to be transparent. And I think at H Global for us, it's very important.
Yeah. Ivana, you wanted to comment directly before I come to Silke.
Susana, perfect. You are exactly bridging to where I wanted to take things. We need to get excited about the potential of DPP and really understand how important that is in the full, again, the architecture design. However, we also need to be very clear-eyed about the issues that it does not solve. And you talked about it, Susana, it's that understanding of the national legislation. And the single most frequent question I get from my members is, what do these EU rules mean? How should I interpret some of the terminology that's used? How do I make sure, because I really do want to make that happen, how do I make sure that my molecules will be accepted in Europe? That's not what DPP will solve. We have to really align on what it is that we want. Then we can measure it, certify it, mutually recognize it, and so on. And then we can put it in the passport. But the starting point is a conversation that needs to be happening not in 6 or 12 months. It needs to be happening literally today and tomorrow about how businesses who wish to produce these wonderful, clean, compliant molecules can actually bring them to the European Union.
That is a very good prompt for me, if I may. Because it is true, I mean, we have to distinguish the container, which is the tool. It's a digital tool and can do many more things. I could speak about this for 2 hours, I won't. And the content. And you've been speaking about the content. But interoperability happens at both levels. So when you spoke about APIs, I said, yes, we have to think about APIs as well. So this is what we're doing now. We're trying to build a tool that is interoperable internationally. We do not stop at EU borders. We are reaching out multilaterally. We're talking to the UN. The UN has a liaison with our standardization effort that is going on in San Senelec. So I'm quite optimistic about this because supply chains are not European, they're global, and that applies not only to hydrogen, that applies to everything. But interoperability then happens at the content level as well, and this is what you've been talking about. And everything that you can do now, indeed, perfection is not necessary, but just get started. All this can be taken on board when the European Commission gets round to adopting these sectoral rules, for instance, on chemicals, for instance, on steel. This is great because, I mean, we don't want to work against industry. We want to make this work for industry. So each of these pieces of sectoral legislation will be preceded by what we call in our jargon an impact assessment. But that's a chance for you. So there will be a public consultation, there will be targeted consultations. So make good use of this. When you see this comes out for chemicals and this comes out for steel, be there and say, like, we want to participate. We have something to say in certification. We think that okay, the manufacturer, the importer is responsible, but it should also be certified. So as to enhance credibility of the DPP. We have an international framework. We have already worked with ISO. European Commission, do not work against this. When you set out the content rules for hydrogen as an ingredient for chemicals or for steel, this is what you should do. And then I think we can make this work wonderfully.
And I think we should go that steps quite fast, because then India will see, oh, we cannot import to the EU green ammonia because of some rules that are basically hampering, like this bidding zone thing. That might put pressure, no pressure to you, Silke, but that might put pressure on the Commission to say, oh, possibly we need to change the rules because they are not working. They are working for the trade between India and Japan, because there are other markets too. And India might look then into, okay, Europe, you have your own hydrogen possibilities. It's more complicated. Bye-bye, we go to other parts of the world. Susana is nodding. Okay. So this is really a serious issue. And by accelerating these steps, not thriving for the perfect, but thriving for really the implementation of the next first steps, we might get to it much sooner than we think. Ivana, we had in Baku last week a certifier and ISO standard high-level meeting. Mm-hmm. And obviously the commitment of IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, IEA, the ISO, the WTO is extremely committed. So it was good to see that all these global institutions that enhance trade, renewables, standards are really looking at us. Sometimes they're asking, why are you Europeans so complex? But they are looking at us and saying, huge market, let's go. I think this is a strong issue. You made it very exciting. You said standards can be very exciting, and you see they are. It's not boring. It's a lot of technology, a lot of data, a lot of things that we need to basically certify in order to trust. That's Stan's job. But we trust you, Stan, to go into that direction. On the slide, we have another company. So we have different companies, just to say, that are doing these jobs, but DEKRA definitely is one of the global leaders here. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for that really lively panel and lots of information that are of value for our audience here. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we take a little picture together?
We take a family photo?
Photo?
Of course.
Where is it? In here?